and heavy D up in the limousine. Hanging pictures on my wall. Every Saturday, rap attack, Mr. Magic Molly Mall. I let my tape rock till my tape pop. Smoking weed and bamboo, sipping on.
All right, welcome everybody. Happy Halloween week. Hope everybody had a great week in fantasy football. Week 8 definitely stuffed our pillowcases with lots of goodies, a few duds, and it's always more fun to have a full slate of games with no buys. So that was a nice thing to find in our trick or treat basket. So a few things we saw this weekend. I got to lean into the bit here. It was a long way from Silence of the Lamb. Boo Nix definitely busy filling his manager's bags with touchdowns. We had a rainbow of fantasy scoring from George Skittles. Tucker Witchcraft conjured up yet another end zone visit. And yes, it was a full Mooney in Tampa Bay yesterday. Joe was mixing up a potent potion of fantasy scoring, and Deontay was certainly no Addams Family value in New York. Maybe somebody other than Lurch should play quarterback there. And after that Calamityville horror, the Jets may need an exorcist. But enough of that. We may need an exorcist after that opening. Enough of the Halloween puns. Let's dig in. It's Chris Vaccaro's therapy session every week. Here we go. And
hey,
also,
Chris, real quick. Dan, that was very boomeresque of you, that opening.
There you go.
Yes.
Dan is playing the role of Dr. Melfi, and away we go.
Away we go. Yes.
So indeed. A lot of observations. A lot of observations, guys. Let's start at the top here. Last Wednesday, we were presented with a pretty big fab period in the high stakes market. A lot of wide receivers were the apple of everyone's eye. We were coming off of a week of losing a handful of wide receivers. Teams were desperate to replace them. And the waiver wire gave us one of the biggest weeks. It was filled with Jawan Jennings sitting on there with Ayuk going out for the season, Debo looking iffy going into the week. Ricky Pearsall was another high bidder, and both the Tampa Bay Bucks wide receivers, including Jalen McMillan, who went for a lot of money. I was trying to get I got a lot of handful of Sterling Shepard. I thought I could spend down and maybe get a nice PPR guy in Sterling Shepard. That didn't work out too well with him leaving the game early. But the big winner, I think, out of last Wednesday's fab run was all the owners that were able to scoop up Cedric Tillman. And they got him at a nice, a nice price. They bid up Cedric Tillman, and it looks like Cedric Tillman might be the new wide receiver 1 there in Cleveland the rest of the season here. 9 targets, 7 catches, 99 yards, 2 touchdowns. The kid was a stud in Tennessee coming out of college. He didn't hit the ground running here at the pro level. They ship out Amari Cooper, and maybe they shipped out Amari Cooper. I mean, listen, Amari Cooper had to go, veteran making some money. But maybe they knew what they had in Cedric Tillman as a replacement, and after 1 week here, Cedric Tillman looks like he can be safely put into your lineup going forward.
Chris, I unfortunately, in a prime time that I'm now 7-1, bid $184 on Cedric Wilson, which I would have won the bid because the Cedric Tillman bid was $179. So nothing I hit more than my own stupidity. But real quick on the Browns offense going forward. Everybody was kind of able to eat out of the wide receivers. Elijah Moore came back from the dead with 8 catches, 80 yards. Even the Jerry Jeudy had, 5 catches for 78 yards. And spoiler alert, my fantasy carnival, I was going to go contrarian here, was going to be the Chargers versus the Browns. But just rest the season for the Browns offense. I did some looking into it. And if you got Tillman, which I have on some teams, that was a great ad, obviously. But this week, first the Chargers. Next week, the bye. Then at New Orleans. Weeks 12 to 15 is Pittsburgh, at Denver, at Pittsburgh versus Kansas City. So that's Joey Porter probably twice, Surtain once, and the vaulted Kansas City pass defense. Just throwing that out there. Thought it needed to be mentioned.
Yep.
All right. I
Yeah,
just wanna-
no doubt about that, Matt. I saw the same thing. Dan.
Yeah, I just want to throw in there. I think Moore is still being slept on just a little bit here. He did have 12 targets, so, and especially given the schedule that Matt's talking about, Tillman might get erased a little bit more than we want, and Moore might be a pretty sneaky option. So, if you're looking for a low-cost way to get into this, if you're in a trading league and you can trade for Moore, do that. If you are in a league where Moore hasn't been picked up yet, I would definitely be doing that because it looks like he's going to get a ton of volume, and it looks like Jerry Jeudy has found a way yet again to lose touches to anyone and everyone that's on his team.
Yeah, and Elijah Moore is, it's painful to talk about him. Being all in on Elijah Moore the last couple years. And then again this year, after the first couple weeks, I've talked about it on this show, I went in and put a couple bucks on Elijah Moore, and I probably owned him in 80% of my high stakes league as my wide receiver 7 or 8. And then I've been dropping him through the weeks. And now it looks like, again, that that's going to pay off costly here. Who could have seen this coming, midway through the year? Nelson, is Elijah Moore the big wide receiver bid this week when you get your fab column going?
Yeah, I think Elijah Moore is going to be up there, and the other guy is going to be Parker Washington for Jacksonville. I mean, it's just so many vacated targets there. So, but the key is that Winston I've talked about this throughout the season. Quarterbacks unlocking receivers, and we needed that. We needed Drake May in New England, right, instead of Brissett, and we needed Winston. And it's painful because we had to put up with Deshaun Watson, and it was so obvious that he just doesn't. He didn't have it. He doesn't have it. Maybe he doesn't have it moving forward. And Winston's a gunslinger. And it's amazing. You ship Cooper out, right? A legit number 1 wide receiver, and the offense, scores the most points it has all year.
Yeah, and it's crazy with the Cleveland offense. I believe the stat was Deshaun Watson was 0 for 19 in 300 plus passing yard games as a Cleveland Brown starter. But between Joe Flacco and Jameis Winston, now it's 6 out of 7 300 plus games. So. And back to Matt's point, listen, it was a perfect storm to come into with the Cleveland Browns playing the Ravens secondary with Humphrey out and the starting rookie out. Like, their secondary was just depleted. So not taking anything away from Jameis in this passing offense, but he does have a tough schedule moving forward here, a lot of weeks, but got to love what you see. And it brings back all these other guys into, starting consideration. So that was my first point on the Cleveland offense right there. My second point, let's go with something different here, a little off the radar here. Where has the 200-point scoring week gone at the high stakes level, guys? I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you guys are like me. You go through all your leagues every week. When was the last time you saw a 200 plus?
I scored 198 points in a prime.
This past week was probably the highest scoring. Say that again.
I scored 198 points in a prime this week, where I drafted Rashee Rice 11th overall and don't have him anymore.
Yeah,
and there you go. But the 200 point.
But yeah, that's
okay.
Still 20 points.
And you saw that a lot, actually, Dan. Yeah, you saw that a lot, Dan. This week was a lot of teams in your leagues, 170s, 180s, like that. That was the first time in a while that we've seen that across the board in leagues. But the 200-point in years past, you'd go through your leagues and once a week you'd see a guy drop a 200. That's what we're all shooting for, is that huge week to hit 200. I haven't seen it all year long, basically. I mean, I think I looked and it was out of 1,050 primetime teams, I think 4 this week broke the 200-point mark, which really not that lot on a high-scoring week. So you can only imagine what it looked like through the past 7 weeks before that with all the low scoring this week. So just an observation. It's like finding a unicorn, having a 200-point scoring week.
Yeah, real quick.
I don't know if anybody's got anything on that.
On the 200-point weeks, I had some teams where it was just like the management positions and who to put in and who to sit. And I looked, I had Downs in like half my leagues. He had 22 points. Tillman, I didn't have him in every league that I owned him in. He scores 28 points. And even Kate Otten, a guy that I had as a backup tight end on quite a few teams, I had him in on a couple of teams, but that's 30 points on the bench there. So, I mean, that was the front.
And I'm glad
for me this week.
100%. And that leads me to my third point, Matt, which is I'll pick up right where you left off there. Let's go with a quick rundown here of Javonte Williams on all my benches in week 7 for 27 points. In all my weeks, my week 8 lineups for 8 points in a smash spot versus Carolina that all of us Javonte Williams owners were giddy coming into the week after what we saw in New Orleans, thinking we were going to get a top 10 performance out of Javonte Williams. That falls flat. All of us Caleb Williams owners getting 10 points in a smash spot in Washington in the game of the week with a Jaden Daniels matchup that fizzles out. How about the Tyrone Tracy owners? All my Tyrone Tracy shares on the benches for his 23 points last night in a tough matchup versus Pittsburgh. And then at the end of the game, gets concussed, and on a short week, we probably can't use him now for week 9. So that's a double screwing for all of us Tyrone Tracy owners. And let's follow it off with the Ladd McConkey, all my Ladd McConkey shares on my benches this past week. 30 points coming into the week, questionable with a hip issue. Had some decent options to play in start of him. And went that way. Now, I'm not bringing this up for Dan's therapy session with me. I'm bringing this up to ask a crazy question to all you guys. I've noticed this past week going through my leagues, and I've noticed it the past couple of years. When you look at the teams at the top, the teams that are in the first and second in your leagues right now, I've noticed that their benches are very weak, and they don't have a lot of options. And their starting lineups are solid, and they don't have to make a lot of decisions. I personally look at my rosters, and I think I'm very deep. I have good options every week that I could bring into my starting lineup. Do you guys find it maybe weird, or is it crazy to say, is it better not to be deep with a lot of options on your bench, that in a year like this, the unexpected big games are coming from players, and you could just every week just look at your starting lineup, know who you're starting, set it and forget it. You're not going to your bench and bringing guys in going, oh, this has got a great matchup. Let me bring this guy in. I'm just falling into that trap of what Maddie just said, of making bad management decisions that look great going in. They're not, the thought process is great, but it's hurting me every week when I have options on my bench that look just as good as my starters. I don't know how you guys feel about that. I'm just bringing it up.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, depth matters when you have injuries and all that kind of stuff. If you happen to be lucky enough to skate through without any injuries, that can definitely work. Mm-hmm. But personally, I'd rather have more options than less. I'll take some small hits. Because there's one way to look at it is, okay, well, if I didn't have that guy that scored 20 on my bench, I'd feel a lot better about my score. But on the other hand, if I had a weak bench, I wouldn't have a guy who scored 20 on my bench. So, there's good news and bad news there. I might have made the wrong decision in retrospect, but at least I have that option there on my bench. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, real quick to piggyback off of Dan's point. It's like having two good quarterbacks, which in this year is kind of like not that obvious, but just having that, you're always making the wrong decision. But I'd rather have the depth, and hopefully I make the right selections.
Yeah, that's always been my thought process. Is I want the depth on the team because in the long run, I should be able to, withstand injuries and things like that and be able to perform. But I agree with Chris. Like it's one of those things. It's actually been a weird year. I took a look at my my teams overall, like my whole portfolio, and it's just I can't quite like pinpoint it because I feel like I have decent teams outside of Rice and Godwin getting injured obviously makes the lineups a lot worse and everything for scoring. But I think it's going back to this year, going with like some of the early running backs and fading, not necessarily fading, but you avoided some of these wide receiver injuries, and like those are the teams that are kind of making out right now. It seems like the teams with Derrick Henry, like Alvin Kamara's worked out obviously, and Aaron Jones. Those are like two like later guys, but like Saquon, Henry, those guys have been very good this year. So it's tough to pinpoint. It's just been a weird year. Usually we see a lot of like running backs getting injured, and this year it's just been a ton of wide receivers and good ones, like that. Sure. I think that's contributing to Chris's point of like not seeing the 200-point weeks. At the end of the day, like the lineups are just not as strong, on a weekly basis. When you're missing, when you're look at the injuries, look at the guys that have been hurt and for how many weeks and some out for the season, it adds up where you're not going to put up those like big monster scores.
And with wide receivers, it has a double whammy too, because you're not only dinging your wide receiver scoring, but it's also dinging your quarterback scoring.
And the quarterback play this year is sinking the wide receiver position, so it's twofold right there. But Nelson, I agree with you. It's a weird season, and I couldn't agree with you more in terms of I look at my ownership percentage. I have the right guys. I feel like my teams are strong. It's just not coming together. It's like you have you're high on three guys that you own, and you have them on one team, and they click on one team mixed in with a bag of shit on your team in 2 or 3 spots, or guy gets hurt early, your quarterback underperforms. End of the day, you're at 120, 125, but yet you got the right combination of the guys you want. Yeah. It's just not coming together for me right now. I guess for you as well.
It's the same for me because and again, it's to all our points, Maddie brought it up, making poor, not unfortunate results. Okay. I think
that's the right way to put it.
We're good fantasy players. Okay. I don't, we're not shitty fantasy players. I don't think any of us, I think highly of all of us. I look at it as you made a good, solid decision. It's just the process was correct. The results are not what we want. And I'll give you an example, Chris. Calvin Ridley coming off the bye week, right? Oh, we got to get Ridley the ball, right? And listen, perfect matchup. Hey, got to start him this week, right? The coach talk and everything. The matchup made sense, and he absolutely he was invisible, right? Did nothing in that game. This past week against the Lions, solid matchup. They're going to be playing from behind, okay? I felt there was I have rosters where Ridley is I don't force him into my lineup, right? So I sit him, and what the fuck? 10 for 143?
Out of nowhere.
What?
Yeah, in the first.
And now you're going to start him next week, and he's going to go back to 3 for 22.
Yeah, Christian Gonzalez is going to be on him the whole game and shut him down. But that's what I'm saying is it's just not it's not clicking to this point. And those are some of the decisions that I'm making for my own teams. And I take great pride. not only am I making roster decisions for my own teams, I'm giving advice on a weekly basis, for other people, to try to help them out. Right. And I take pride in that. In a lot of my process is, game script. I tell a story. How do I think the game is going to go? And then that helps me make that decision with that player. I take in analytics into account. I take in
everything.
Snap count.
It's a week-long process. Yeah, we're all doing it.
I take all those factors into account, and it's just like, Ridley. There, I'm missing out on his 25-point game. It's
real quick. As Chris mentioned about the 200-point week, there's 4 weeks left in the regular season of the FFPC and 6 in the NFFC. Now's the time where if you can hit that 200-point or be right around that, and you get a couple of weeks like that together, that changes everything. And that's exactly how you want to enter it. Like when you got that team that last month or so that gets hot, those are the teams that you want entering the big dances.
Matt, 100% real quick on that, Matt. What you just said is very accurate. Right now, I have a lot of my teams are in the middle of the pack, right? That's 6 to 8 what we saw this past week with the guys that dropped the 170s, the 180s. If you were the guys that had an off week and dropped 100 to 120, these guys just blew right past you in the standings. They went from 9th place up to 3rd place, like that. And now they're in it. They're locked in that seat now for the last 6 weeks here. So all you got to do is if you're not that team that's 10th through 12th and you just bombed out the first 8 weeks, any week here, you can drop that 180, 190 and shoot right up the standings. And now you're right back in it until the end. But it's getting late. I felt that switch. I don't know if you guys felt it this past week. 100%. You felt that turn of separating the leagues now this past week where it's like, all right, wow, the first 8 weeks are in the books. We're in the final 6 now coming into week 9. It's time you can't have the 110s anymore. You can't have those weeks where you go 120 sub. You got to be consistent, and going forward, you got to have those 150 pluses here if you want to make the top 3 or 4, whatever it is in your league settings, to make the playoffs. So it's put up or shut up time starting this week going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. And the important thing is to play your rosters that way. I mean, you're not going to get 200 points with Jackson Smith and Jigba in there. You got to have the Calvin Ridley pick instead.
But he'll give you a solid 11 or 12, Dan. He'll give you that 11 or 12. He jacked it up to 13 this past week, though. So credit to JSN for giving the extra point and the extra effort.
Coming through for us.
You know it.
All right, guys, we're going to pay some bills real quick. We will be right back.
Oh, the NFL season is underway, and if you drafted on Fast Draft this summer, the Origins All-Rookie game, the Flex 4 game, check the live scoring, see where you are in the standings. You might be in line for a big payday. And no matter where you are in the world, you should have the Fast Draft app because there's a custom Dynasty mock tool that's free to everybody with super sharp ADPs, and we're rolling out DFS tournaments throughout the year, and the 2025 tournaments will go live before any of us realize, oh my God, the 2025 season is upon us. Download Fast Draft, register, and you will be alerted as soon as these new contests are unleashed. Check it out on fastdraft.app.
All right, and real quick, we're also going to each make our quick 50 cents here. Hustle Kings has asked a question, and Zay for Adams. And is Shakir a sneaky wide receiver too? And he's actually getting 2 for 1. So we're only making 25 cents a question. But Zay for Adams, I would say I would take the Adams side if you really need to like a lift. Zay is probably the safer play, but I would tend to go for the Adams side. How about you guys?
I'm taking Zay Flowers all day, every day. Zay is, another 12 targets this week. He's the main guy in the highest powered offense. Last week, I said the Jets were going to win 8 straight games on this show.
After week 9, right?
That's yep.
Right.
Nelson, it starts this week. There was a caveat to that. Jets are pathetic, man. I can't believe they lost that game. That's a whole nother level. But to answer your question,
that's sad, Chris. I'm sorry, but my Patriots with Brissett at quarterback.
Pathetic. I have so much money invested gambling wise on the Jets in every which way possible this year that I have to go to the bank and get a loan pretty soon to pay this. That's how much I went all in on the Jets this season. Anyway, Zay Flowers for me, guys. I'll move it all along to you guys.
Yeah, for me, it's Zay as well. As far as Shakir goes, I think he's probably the most underrated after the catch receiver in the league. Is he a wide receiver 2? I think he's more a wide receiver 3 type because the Bills are just going to spread it every week. We saw Kid Keon have the best game of his career, that great catch he made in the end zone. He blocked somebody into the bench and then caught a nice pass that was thrown high. So I love Shakir. I think he's a nice bench option to have, but I couldn't label him as a 2 yet.
Yeah, I'm taking Zay Flowers in that trade, and Shakir for me is more of wide receiver 3 type of guy. If Shakir's my wide receiver 2, I'm not feeling that great, with my team. But there's been tons of injuries, so you do what you got to do.
You want to know what's crazy about Zay Flowers in this past game? He was wide open for that 31-yard touchdown.
Oh, yeah.
Overthrew.
Could have been bigger.
And then he gets tackled on the half-inch line.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, right there, it should have been at least 30 or more.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hats off to the Harry Snowman for upping the ante and asking a question. So, thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Dan, you pocketing that 20 or how's that get distributed, buddy?
Yeah.
I don't know. I got to look
Parents
into
got to pay for the jet
it.
pack.
First time I've ever messed around
Make
with
sure I get a $5 check in the mail, all right, Dan?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm back charging it against your therapy bill, Chris. So,
all right.
I'm sorry, none for you. The rest of you, Matt and,
you know what?
Nelson,
Going back
man,
to
they're going to make some money here.
Yeah. Speaking of Zay Flowers, going back to draft season, I just remember that 3-4 turn. My priority was Zay Flowers, Terry McLaurin, if I could. I know a lot of us, Nelson, you were in on that too. I believe Zay Flowers and Terry at the turn there. That's actually worked out real well if you were able to pick off that combination in a lot of drafts at that 3-4 turn. I know I have one prime time where 36-37 was Zay and Terry. They've worked out really, really well. Having great seasons, and Terry McLaurin did it again. 7 for 120. What was it? 4 for 125 this past week. Terry?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So he
not the easiest matchup too.
No, exactly. I was worried about him, and for a little while, you know what? With Terry McLaurin, how many times has he caught a bomb and gotten tripped up heading into the end zone this year? I feel like it's 4 or 5 times that he's caught the bomb and it's like just escape, and they've caught him on the tackle, or else he walks in for a touchdown. So, all right, before the break, let me get back to the observations here. We were talking about disappointments in our lineups. Let's talk about Jordan Mason here. It's been a good run, Jordan. It's over now. We were all excited about Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason was like the young girl you meet. She's like like the young hot blonde. You start going out with her a little bit. First couple weeks is fun. You're having a good time with her. And then all of a sudden it's like, all right, listen, we got no future together. This is fun while it was lasted. And it's time to move on here. I'll let you go spread your wings. I got to go settle down. Jordan Mason is done now. The first couple weeks, he drops 22 points, has another 17-point game. In week 4, 24 points. And since then, he's actually hurt your starting lineup. I know all my Jordan Mason shares I've had in every week. And since week 5, he's been consistent. 9 points, 9 points, 9 points. And then leaves again with an injury and drops a 1.8 this past week. So heading into the bye, he's not going to help you this week. Week 10, there's the rumors of Christian McCaffrey looking like he's going to be ready to come back. And the kid Garendo, I don't know, man. He looks good to me. So he's got to play a role, even if CMC isn't back. So Jordan Mason, it was fun while it was lasted, but I got to let you go now. So all those teams that got off to the hot starts with Mason as their RB1 or 2, it's over and done now, in my opinion.
Are you saying you're cutting him?
I am not cutting him with the way the running back lands. Nelson, have you looked at what the high stakes market looks like on the waiver wire at running back these last month?
No,
I know you have.
No one's getting hurt. Listen, I don't root for injuries. I really don't. It's just, I just know it's part of the game, and it's usually the running backs that are getting hurt. And we talked about this. It's been the wide receivers. So with no one getting hurt, that's why the inventory, there's nothing there. There's nothing exciting to go grab. That's why last week, the fab week of the year was all those wide receivers.
All receivers.
It was the wide receivers from San Fran. It was the wide receivers from Tampa Bay. It was the wide receivers from the Browns. Like, if you look at it like that, that was the exciting week. And it was all wide receivers. I kind of like chuckled when I was like looking at it. I'm like, I'm not even going to bid on running backs. Like there's nobody like I even want. Like you're just, I don't, that's just how it's been this year.
There's nothing that, like, Nelson, I had one league where with injuries and bye weeks, or injuries and stuff, I needed an RB2 on one of, I don't know, whatever team it was. And I went to and I'm looking straight down the list. There wasn't one guy I could see getting a touch that upcoming week. Like, it's not like, oh, let me go get my 5-7 points with this guy. There wasn't a guy that I was like, is he going to play? Like, it's completely barren. I don't know who even emerged. Even if something emerges, Nelson, to your point, it's like with injuries and stuff, the backups to the backups are rostered straight across the board. It's not like, oh, the starter goes down, let me go bid this guy up, he becomes available. No, it's like the RB4 or 3 on the team. It's absolutely crazy how the running back fab market is barren this year.
Now, to touch base on the Jordan Mason thing, from my perspective, this is how I look at it, because I have quite a bit of Mason and I have even more Garendo. So, I'm trying to look at it not from a biased standpoint, rooting for for those guys, but in that offense, Mason has shown 20-point upside, and I believe he's a rookie, and rookies take time. Coaches, it takes a while for coaches to get comfortable and to trust them. Okay. Garendo the other day looked really, really good, really explosive. They were throwing the ball to him also. Okay. He was catching the ball. No problems there. I look at it as McCaffrey will probably be back week 10. The thing is with McCaffrey, all it takes, it's not like, okay, he's back and he's going to be the guy. Yes. Mason, Garendo, worthless in terms of you're not thinking about putting them in your lineup.
Yeah.
But these two guys have already shown, what they're capable of. And Mason, I really think, has more to do with his shoulder, on why, the last 2 weeks of duds. Obviously, last week, pretty obvious. He left the game because of his shoulder. And then there's actually been games where he's had like touchdowns called back and some like big runs called back due to penalties that doesn't show up in the box score. So all I'm saying is those guys are probably the type of running backs that I want to have rostered.
Oh,
because if McCaffrey goes out there,
hey Nelson, but under no circumstance was I don't want to come across like I said it's over in terms of like being able to like locked in as a starter. You got all your Mason shares go from locked in starter now, where he hasn't helped you in a month plus now, to your bench. You don't drop a Jordan Mason or a Garendo at all. No, I don't mean that by any means. I'm just saying it's a huge swing that you just lost a locked in top 15 RB, every week, even though it hasn't worked out that way in a month, to going to your bench now. But if there's a candidate to get re-injured or have a setback or miss some time down the stretch, it's definitely McCaffrey once he comes back. So, those shares of Mason and Garendo, they just go to your bench now. So we're all losing a starting running back. So hopefully you have that Tyrone Tracy, et cetera, to come into your starting lineup and take over the role of a starter.
Or a guy
Tyrone
named
Tracy.
CMC. I mean, he might take over a role of a starter too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But speaking of Tracy, though, I'll tell you what. I had him on my bench. I have him on a few teams and some important teams, and that's another example, prime example of, maybe I am making poor decisions, but like just looking at Tracy on my bench, and I'm just like, Singletary's back. There's a good possibility they start mixing him in, even though Tracy has shown, obviously, and I'm not saying that Dable alluded to like, oh, Singletary's going back to being the starter or anything. Mm-hmm. Tracy probably, I assumed he would get the majority share, but against the Steelers, like, I'm like, I can't start Tracy. I almost like, I feel like I almost like, looked for better options, on my bench to play in place of Tracy because of the matchup and because Singletary, was back, and it still did, it backfired.
I said it earlier, Nelson, that hurt the most this week. I'm 47% Tyrone Tracy ownership across all my leagues. And I didn't start him in more than, I think, 2 leagues this week versus Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, on 4 different prime times this week, Mason was my RB2, and I couldn't get Tracy in those lineups, okay, because I have 4 good receivers. So I went Mason over Tracy. No brainer, right? I don't think, would anybody have come into this week Mason versus Dallas at home?
No. Mason locked in.
Mason locked in. And guess what? It's a 22-point difference, and that's what we're all living with. And to your other point, Nelson, earlier, is it bad process? I don't think so. Is it bad lineup? I don't think so. It's just things aren't working out, and I think we're all the same way. We're all perfectionists when it comes to this craft, right? None of us are going to be mistaken for bad drafters or bad players or whatever, but it's a year that I haven't seen before, and it's frustrating for all of us to see these points on the bench and go, did I miss that? Was I looking at it wrong that I didn't have Tracy in any of my lineups? But coming into a week versus a Pittsburgh defense on the road, it's like, what's going on here? And I just feel that's been 8 weeks of the same thing, at least in my book. And it's nice to hear that you guys are dealing with the same thing. The lineup decisions are just, it's backfiring. That's it.
I mean, one of the things this week, like being that we're talking about Jordan Mason, like I had some teams going into the Sunday night, Monday night game where it was Jordan Mason and Malik Neighbors. And I'm thinking, right now I got 130 points and I can get to 160,
175. Sure.
And you get 1.8, and Neighbors at the end salvaged it with like 14.5. But those were 2. And the other problem I've noticed this year a lot too, it's like Jordan Love gets hurt. That one there. If you started Drake Maye in the first quarter, the guy had 11.5 points. He's looking fantastic. And he's gone for the rest of the game. So, I mean, that's happening a lot too.
I mean, did you guys all feel the same way? Like the 1:00 games were actually really high scoring, a lot of fantasy production. Everything was great. And my teams are up around, 90, 100 points, whatever. And I got, half my lineup still going. Going into the 4:00 games, you got 5 games. And then you had the Sunday night or Monday nighter. And I feel like everyone bombed. It was like the 4:00s died this past week where everyone just like all the Bear, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Swift was very good, by the way. You got to give him his props. Swift has become a really great pick on the draft board. But, both sides, Washington, Chicago, those other games, everything was just shit. Nobody was producing 4:00 and on. And then, luckily if you had CD Lamb, that was great for Sunday night. But I don't know. That's that. I know. Let me get out of here with my observation so you guys could get to yours. My last one, I'm going to make it a double real quick. Puka's the alpha in LA. Kupp is taking a back seat. He's in the passenger side, maybe even maybe even in the back seat. Stafford's first read is to Puka all night long, right off the bat. That was crazy to me. So Puka's locked in as a wide receiver, top 12 rest of the way, in my opinion. And last year, being a Jalen Hurts owner, the tush push was a lot of fun. And this year, being a huge Saquon Barkley owner, the tush push isn't so much fun this year as it was last year. It's absolutely ridiculous that at no point do the Eagles, once they get inside the 2-yard line, feed their $15 million stud running back, and they just keep forcing their quarterback, who, if he gets hurt, the team and the season's done. Give Barkley something. The guy has 6 touchdowns. That's great. He should have 12 on the season. I still can't believe every week how many times the Eagles get on the 1-yard line and Barkley doesn't get a sniff. That's it, guys.
Ram's comment for me, I mentioned last week the sneaky add a quarterback as your backup with Stafford with these.
Yep.
I didn't know Puka was coming back this quick. But to quote Stringer Bell, one of the great characters in TV history, put the word out. We are back up. The Rams, to me, are one of the most dangerous teams in the NFC rest of season. I think they could beat anybody as long as they're healthy with this quartet of Stafford, Puka, Kupp, and Kyren. And, going forward, I think it's going to be a mixture of both Puka and Kupp. That was one game. Maybe that's how they game planned it against the Vikings. There was word before that he was on a strict snap count. That didn't go to fruition, or at least every time
he played 40 out of 70. He played 40 out of 70 snaps.
Okay, well, whatever. He got
and that's the crazy thing is that wasn't that inaccurate. He played 40 out of 70, but he's just targeted. He was just Stafford's first read, like Kupp's been in the past.
For some strange reason, though, just last thing on the Rams. For some when Puka and Kupp are out there, DeMarcus Robinson becomes a thing. He caught the touchdown passes. He doesn't get a ton of targets, but he becomes a third option, like on a Hail Mary, if you need it.
Yeah.
Yep.
The
go
thing
ahead,
with
Nelson, then I want to go after you.
Yeah, go for it. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay. One thing to keep in mind is that, really the Vikings, I don't think knew that Puka was going to be back in this game until very late. So I think they game planned around stopping Kupp rather than stopping Puka. So I think that was a little bit of a curveball that was thrown to the defense. And, and I do expect it's going to be a little, as Matt said, it's going to be a little bit, sometimes it's going to be a Puka week, sometimes it's going to be a Kupp week. But definitely a good offense going forward. If everybody stays healthy, I think we can expect big things. Go ahead, Nelson.
Yeah, the way I was reading that on Thursday night is that 100% the Rams were listening to trade offers with Cooper Kupp. And, we spoke about this, Matt, last week, because I know you're very particular on, hey, if the Rams beat the Vikings, they've now got a legit shot because now they go to Seattle and that becomes a big division game. And I agree with that, but I also agree or feel that the season, a loss to the Vikings and things not looking so great, and all of a sudden they lose to Seattle, we got to think about rebuild, and we've got our 31-year-old wide receiver making a good amount of money. Let's get a draft pick for it and move along to next year. So I absolutely think that they were listening to trade offers, and I think because Puka was going to be on a limited snap count, and he was, okay, that was the story, and 100% he was. The focus was, you know what? We don't need Kupp to be first game back, 20 targets, and wear him out, potentially get him hurt, and now we don't have him moving forward, and we can't trade him. So, NFL's a business first and foremost. So I know coaches at the end of the day they're trying to win games, but I think that played a factor into them force feeding Puka because listen, McVay is one of the best offensive coaches in my opinion, and it was clear that they were focusing on getting Puka the ball early and often. So that's just my sentiment, and I think that moving forward, I think you're going to see, both of them, be able to produce in this offense.
Well, quick question for this upcoming Sunday at Seattle, the Rams at Seattle. I mean, who do you like if you had to pick that game? I mean, I kind of like the Rams. I think the Rams are ascending.
The energy, the vibe. Seattle just terrible, man. Like
nobody plays worse
how do you lay
game
an
script
egg
than
at
Seattle.
home? You got a big game against Buffalo. Like, what are you doing? Like, Geno Smith looked like he was hungover, drunk. Like, the offensive line was terrible, not holding up. That was really disappointing. I was expecting like a good high scoring game there. And I thought Seattle would, Buffalo held their end of the bargain, but Seattle just
been a brutal. It's been a brutal month for Seattle for fantasy owners. It's been a month long of terrible game scripts. I just no offense and no team in the NFL gets game scripted out right off the bat every week than Seattle does. They have good matchups every week. Bills come into Seattle. They go on a 10.5-minute drive to start the game. Before you know it, they're kicking off to Seattle. It's 4.5 minutes left in the first quarter, and Seattle hasn't even ran a play yet. So it's like it's over and done already. So, and to your point with the Rams, yeah, it's a huge swing game last Thursday. You lose that game, you go to 2-5, instead of 3-4, and then you're probably selling if you lose in Seattle. So save their season, They probably do trade off Cooper Kupp and everything, but what a huge time right now, these next 2 weeks, for all those Puka shares, Cooper Kupp shares, and Nico Collins shares. If your fantasy team was able to stay in it and be right there in the mix, you're getting 3 huge studs back into your lineup going forward, and those teams could really take off.
Yeah. The last thing I'm going to say, guys, is if we didn't watch that Thursday night game and you went out to dinner with your wife, you get home, okay?
Hero. We call it the hero game, Nelson.
Yeah. You get home, right? You didn't pay attention. You weren't looking at your phone. You look at the box score, end of the night, okay? And you see, Puka, what he put up and what Kupp put up. Are we really having this conversation? Like, it almost
17
like,
and 16. Yep.
Like Kupp had a good game. Like it was solid
in the box score.
In the box score, for fantasy, at the end of the day, it is.
DeMarcus Robinson had a good game in the box score.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm just saying,
that's where Nelson. To your point,
and how Nelson, it played out.
Yes, but Nelson, to your point, that's the difference between the people that watch the games and see what's going on, and then the box score readers. Because you're right. At the end of the game, it was Puka 17.5, Kupp 16.5. It was even, right? Yeah. You watch that game, though, Stafford's dropping back, and he's locked in on Puka over and over and over, every snap. And it was like, wait, is Cooper Kupp on the field? Kupp was in and out of the game. He was the second read, the third read. And then he got lucky with, 2 long catches at the end of the game in garbage time that jacked his numbers up. And he got the cheap touchdown early that luckily saved you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's in the eye of the beholder and how we look at it from different perspectives. Obviously I have heavy ownership of Cooper Kupp, and I looked at that game as like, okay, yeah, is it something to make a note of? Yes. But like, I'm not going to overreact and say Puka's like clear cut number one, Kupp is, the backseat guy. Only because when it was like, hey, we got to get a first down. We got to keep the ball out of, the Vikings' hands. Cooper Kupp was the go-to guy at the end of the game. And as far as like fluky touchdowns and stuff, like, Stafford evading a sack and throwing it to Kupp, that's just football. Like I look at it as like Kupp's gonna get red zone looks, so I look at it.
Maybe I'm overreacting with the Puka is the lead dog.
I'm just trying to say it nicely, Chris. I think saying Kupp backseat, maybe is a little too much.
Well, you guys didn't mention.
Let's see this. Let's see what it looks like this week. But to me, in the first game back with the 2 of them, it looked like Puka was the lead guy and Kupp was the second. But it could be a 1 week thing. We've seen that every week from every team. So this week it could be Kupp 20 targets and Puka 5, and then I'm looking like an idiot next week on the show.
And the one thing we didn't mention is, the Rams have the best punt returner in the league. Kyron Williams just scores a touchdown every week. No matter what, he usually gets to about 100 yards combined. So shout out to him.
We all have to take our losses with Kyron Williams this year. We all got to take it.
Well, for my observations, guys, I've been talking about this. Seems like every week, just bad coaching in the NFL. I think that has to do impacts our fantasy teams. Our players not performing, injuries, those things factor in. But I think coaching is a huge factor in terms of impacting fantasy. And, I always talk about like situational football and just seeing the guys that are just, in over their heads. And like, I'll give you guys I gave you guys examples last week. And then this week, like the Jets, that's coaching, that's not necessarily, the Jets have the players, okay, on the field to be a winning team. For them to lose to New England, that's coaching. At the end of the day, like Saleh, they probably needed a new voice. I agree. But promoting the defensive coordinator there, Ulbrich, he looks like a deer in headlights. Like
deer in headlights.
He doesn't know what's going on. Like
nothing.
They're a clown show. They're a clown show.
Nelson, nothing points to that more than the 3 timeouts debacle in the first quarter, back to back. Yeah, it's a clown show. It really is.
And Rodgers, he can be condescending 100%. Okay, I get it, but Rodgers has been in the NFL long enough. He knows what good coaching is and what bad coaching is. He knows that he's on a team right now with just bad coaches, and all he can do is shake his head. And you see it. You see it on the field with like his body language because he's like, fuck, like when
he does that, it's terrible because it's just hurting the team chemistry even worse. He's helping bring it down. I mean, that's the Jets are rotten from the top down. There's no doubt about it. They keep finding new ways to lose.
But Dan, something's wrong there in terms of like Davante Adams came in, and after the first game, being that 3 days, he was like, there's no energy on this sideline. There's no leaders there, on both sides of the ball. And that goes to, you can have as much talent as you want on paper, on the roster, okay? But when you don't have those 3 or 4 glue guys that you bring in that are the rah-rah guys, the Jameis Winstons, those guys that bring you all together. If you just have a locker of all guys looking at each other going, who's going to step up and talk here? Who's going to be the leader? No, you got a whole bunch of backseat guys. You don't have any front seat guys. So
it's very important
in
the
collection of players that they're all looking out for their own best interests. That's what it is.
It's very important in the locker room to have, leaders. And, it goes back to like Jameis Winston. The Browns wanted to play for Winston. They won that game against the Ravens because they were ready. They showed up. They wanted to play for Winston. Yeah. When Brady was in the league, players wanted to play for Brady. Aaron Donald, another leader. When Aaron Donald was with the Rams, players, they showed up. They were held accountable. When you have guys like that don't take shit and expect excellence, that you have no choice. You're either the outcast, or like you're gonna join in and you're gonna work hard.
Well, I mean, look, if you watch that Raiders Chiefs game, we're talking about bad coaching. And you just look at Antonio Pierce. It seems like week in and week out. And I know we've ragged on him before.
But I wasn't even going to mention him today, Matt, because I've done him so many times.
Yeah, but I mean, they had so many opportunities to at least tie that game or maybe even take a lead. They were inside the 10. I mean, they got an interception. The guy got tackled on like the 1 or the 2. And he just continually just runs the ball. Like, I mean, you got Zamir White-Madison. It's not like you got King Henry or Saquon back there. And you got a tight end who's like, all world And even Jacoby Myers is a hell of a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. And even that kid Tucker can make plays, design something for him. It's just like, it was mind-blowing just watching his, refusal to do anything else but just try and run the ball and watching him just lose yardage on like every play.
Yeah.
You're saying you didn't you weren't impressed with Madison's 14 rushes for 15 yards stat?
Honestly, I loved it because I had the Chiefs at even. I had them on the money line parlay. So, I love that because I was scared as shit. I'm not going to lie to you.
Pierce is taking the slow death, not the fast death. I mean, it's like he's terrified to put the ball in Minshew's hands, which I kind of get.
I
but
get it.
On the other hand, you're not
that.
going to win games with that running game. So, that's your only path to victory, and he refuses to take it. Even though, it's going to lead to some spectacular losses. You still got to, at least try for the win.
Another one was that Bears-Washington game. Like, what a dud. But, again, the Bears coaching, that head coach is bad. The offensive coordinator, Waldron, I am not impressed. I can't stand him. I was talking about him beginning of the year of, how he was running that offense, and things started to look up and started to get better. But you're at the goal line, and you've got 4 opportunities, okay, to punch it in. You don't give it to Swift, who was rolling, okay? He was on a little bit of a heater, looking good. You don't give it to him one time, okay? But you decide to give it to number 68, offensive lineman, okay? That hasn't freaking touched the ball, okay? Biggest possession of the game, okay? And that's what you decide? That's the play call?
It's so stupid, Nelson. It was the dumbest call I can ever remember seeing in the history of game on the line, and you do that. And you have Roschon Johnson. The only reason you have Roschon Johnson on your roster is to put him in on the 1 yard line so he can walk in as a real running back. Yeah. But yet you're giving it to your new refrigerator Perry, who you think in the game on the line. Yeah. You idiot. That's the play you make when you're playing your division rival and you're up 25 on them and you want to stick it in their ass and you say, here you go, I'm going to give it to my offensive lineman and I'm going to embarrass you on your home field to go
100%.
That's when you make that call. You don't make it when you're down 5 games on the line. Let me give it to the fat guy so I can look like a genius here.
Listen,
you look like an idiot. He should have been fired right there on the field. What a joke.
It's so bad. And listen, I like scheming up plays and kind of pulling, the Houdini act every once in a while to fake out, the defense. But I'm a big believer that with coaching, when it's showtime and it's game time, you're giving it to your top guys. That's who you're looking for. That's the guys that are going to make the plays. You're just getting way too cute and trying to be the smartest guy in the room, making that kind of call. And the other thing that stood out to me where I could tell he was just shitting himself and didn't know what to call. He had end of the game, he had Caleb 2 designed QB runs with Caleb in a row, back to back. And I'm just what are you doing right now? What, how do you call 2? There wasn't you could tell it wasn't a broken play. He was looking for a pass and then ran it. It was 2 designed runs back to back. And I'm just
the Bears had opportunities this offseason with the number 1 pick. They could have moved on from their head coach. They didn't have to keep – there was no reason they had to keep him. They made a terrible selection with the OC. And shout out to Swift because the first month of the season, he looked very unimpressive. Yeah. And this last month, he looks like a totally different guy. But my question is this. Rest of the season, being that we're talking the Bears, is it Caleb Williams versus Drake Maye, and who would you take?
Well, listen, you know how I feel with Drake Maye. I don't think he's a league-winning quarterback. I thought Caleb was, and he took a huge step back this past week. I didn't like what I saw out of him again. I was just starting to jump on the train again. I did jump on the train, and I got ran over. He's got too much happy feet in the pocket. He really didn't look good at all. He looked like week 1 Caleb all over again this past week, and he's bailing you out a little bit on the ground. Matt, I honestly don't know how to answer that. I'm going to stick with Caleb probably, but I mean, you guys love Drake Maye.
Yeah,
it's Bo Nix.
I mean, look, Bo Nix played Carolina too. Everybody
Nix,
context matters.
Yeah, but Matt, you know what? I'll say this: Caleb played Washington, and hand up. No. Washington went from a defense that we were all picking on. All of a sudden, now they're playing pretty well. But I mean, the matchups were there. We sat here on the show and going, "Hey, the next 3 weeks, Caleb's got dream matchups."
Yeah. But here's my point: this guy has a horrible offensive line, like some other quarterbacks do. He's got nobody on that team. Maybe outside of Stevenson, his receivers are garbage.
Oh, Drake Maye. Sorry,
Drake Maye. Yeah. And he had 11.5 points again. He can do it on the ground. He's got an arm. Is he going to have some tough games like this week if he plays? Tennessee's pass defense. I mean, it's a shame that Tennessee doesn't have a good quarterback because they have a really good defense. And they keep getting put in bad situations. That's why they're getting blown out of these games. It's not because their defense is terrible. It's their offense is that bad. Their quarterback play has been that bad. But I don't know. I mean, if you have Drake Maye as a backup quarterback, or even if you carry him 3, he's somebody I definitely want to have on my team.
He was well on his way to a good fantasy day last week against the Jets defense. And then he leaves with the concussion and everything. But I've said this and I'll say it again. Drake Maye, never mind Caleb Williams, like Drake Maye, I'm starting over Mahomes the rest of the year. I'm playing Maye over Mahomes. And I think depending on the matchups, yes, you could play Caleb because he's got some good matchups. And then
I wouldn't do that this week, though.
No, correct.
Because Kansas City has Tampa Bay on Monday night. He's playing.
So that's what I was just going to say.
Defense.
But it's not only Tampa Bay.
No, I agree with that. It depends on the matchup. But I'm just saying that to answer your question, like to me, Drake Maye has shown more potential to me than Caleb because he's got a worse offensive line and he's got absolutely nobody in terms of talent. Stevenson, okay, solid. Hunter Henry, solid. But there's no big players here. And Caleb's got DJ Moore. He's got a Dunze who is like a top 8 pick in the draft. He's got a Keenan Allen. You can say what you want about him, but Keenan Allen's on New England is the best receiver on New England if he was there. Okay. You got Cole Kmet, who basically you could say is Hunter Henry times 2, is probably better than Henry. And then you got, Swift that you could debate, who's better, him or Stevenson. So I'm going to say that Caleb is surrounded with the way more talent, but coaching matters. And I think Van Pelt is just a better offensive coordinator than Waldron. And I think that's the issue there that's holding back the Bears. You guys have any more thoughts on that? Or
the last thing, I'll just say this with the whole Mahomes versus Maye thing, Nelson. Mahomes going forward, his schedule opens up. Mahomes, and I don't know how everybody feels with DeAndre Hopkins getting more acquainted into this offense, giving him some, Kelsey, Hopkins, Worthy. If Juju's healthy, come this week or another week, maybe their offense starts clicking a little better down the stretch. I'm not gonna go away from Mahomes in that one. But back to you, Nelson.
Here's the thing, Chris. I have maybe the same amount of Mahomes that you do, and if not, it's not. You don't have it by much. I have Mahomes on teams, so this is not coming from, me like I faded Mahomes and I've got this like super biased opinion. I'm just saying that, like I've seen it enough. Like it's 8 weeks, man, and against the Raiders, okay, he put up a solid day, but that solid day was QB 14, okay, for fantasy. Okay. There was 13 better quarterbacks that you could have started that outscored Mahomes. That's what I'm saying is like against the Raiders and the team that mocked you and they did the whole puppet act with like Kermit the Frog and stuff like that. There's that whole narrative, right? That, oh, Mahomes is going to stick it in their ass, in this game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, just 260.
I can't argue that the upside is gone.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm looking that kind of game, the narrative, the matchup, that's 330 yards, 4 touchdowns. Like that's what I'm talking. So like,
so you could see Drake Maye dropping a 303 or 304 type game.
The rushing
with that Patriots offense. That's my point with the Drake Maye thing is we've seen Caleb do it. We've seen Caleb drop 35 fantasy
got
points
28
more.
and 29 points in his first 2 games. Then he had 11.5 in the first quarter.
Is that
I'm just saying, has Mahomes put up that kind of game?
30 points. No. If he can get close to 30 points, I'd take that.
But I can see Mahomes going 40 plus with a 304.
Yeah.
I love Mahomes this week. I love Mahomes this week, and I'm bullish on the KC offense going forward. I'll say that.
Yeah.
If you're looking for consistent 25s, then go ahead, start Drake Maye. But when I put my quarterback in, I'm going, who can I see if everything goes right can drop me the 40? And I can't see Drake Maye dropping 40s in a Patriots offense that's dog shit.
Yeah,
that's my point.
My thing is I can't see putting up with 18 or 20 points looking for 40 when I've got 25 available to me.
Well, that's playing scared.
There's
Dan.
a time where you got to swing for the fences, but it also depends on your team. There's going to be teams where I'm like, yeah, I'll take that 25 rather than suffer with 15 or 18 or maybe 20 if I'm lucky. There are other teams that are their backs against the wall, and I got to look for that 40 points. I get it. So I think it kind of depends where you're coming from. Real quick before we let Nelson get his next comment in, we're gonna take a quick break on the podcast for another word from our sponsors. We'll be right back. Okay, and we're back. Nelson, go to it.
No, I want to stay on this for another minute, only because I have Mahomes. I want to beat this fucking dead horse. Okay, and I'm frustrated as much as Chris is, and I'm just saying that his best game of the season this past Sunday is still not good enough to beat Maye's best games, or his standard game that I think he can have. That's my point, is that Mahomes hasn't shown it all year long. I don't see what changes. I don't see how he's going to put up 40.
Well, I'm giving you the change. Wait, hold on. I'm giving you the out here. I'm telling you that DeAndre Hopkins is now in the offense, right? And do we look at the offense a little differently now with what we saw Juju? If Juju comes back into this offense next week, right, and you have Hopkins and Juju, Kelsey just put on a 10 for 90 and a touchdown, looking better. The offense is starting to come together a little bit more. Do we think that? And if that's the case, would you rather send out Mahomes in good matchups that he has going forward, like Tampa? And I looked at his schedule. There's a lot of weeks that I'm like, all right, I'll start Mahomes there. Or do you want to go and rely on a Patriots offense that any week can drop 7 points? Or do you think Drake Maye is that good where you see the upside of 30 plus every week?
I see the upside of 30 plus every week from Drake Maye because of the rushing ability. And this year, unfortunately, Mahomes was a bad pick. And
100%.
And I still
think it's a matchup based play. I have both of these guys, and for me, it's matchup based. Like this week versus Tennessee, I don't want to start Drake Maye, and Mahomes versus
he's
Tampa
probably
Bay.
Out anyway. But yeah. I get the point. I'm just that's from my point of view, and maybe it's a hyperbole, with putting Mahomes out to pasture, but I don't see it. I think we've had enough.
It would have been nice to see Drake Maye finish that game versus the Jets. And maybe I would have changed my tune if he dropped another 30. And I got to get it out of my head that this Jet defense is anything good, because they're not. They suck.
No pass rush. And
Well,
Zero.
I'm telling you, watching
pass
part of
rush.
that game and then watching Brissett operate, the Patriots might have smoked the Jets in that game if Maye stayed upright. I mean, he was upright, concussion. If he doesn't leave that game, the receivers were getting open. There was no pass rush to worry about. And
well, enough with the Sauce Gardner thing. He got burnt. He let up that catch to Kayshon Boutte, on that late game, game winner pretty much for the Patriots there. That's his guy. He dropped the ball right there. Well,
I mean, being that we're talking Jets defense, I have a good point. It was going to be for later, but I mean, Dead Man Walking has been like Tank Dell, and now with Diggs out, Nico not coming back for a week, they have no other receivers outside of like Schultz, really. I mean, you're pretty much kind of like forced to start him. But, I mean, if you look at his game logs, he's gotten over 60 yards once all year. I mean, he's got a 0. He's got a -3 receiving in there. I was, what do you do Thursday night? You're going to be forced to play Tank again, right?
Well, if you're not going to play him here as the top guy on the team, when are you going to play Tank Dell? To me, you have to start a Tank Dell and live with what he gives you there.
Let me phrase it. How confident are you in starting Tank Dell? Because, I mean, even C.J. Stroud has been a major disappointment, at least in my eyes.
Very big.
I had thoughts of grandeur.
Stroud's mini Mahomes.
He is.
That's a good one.
And he started off the season very well. I actually have 4 or 5 big C.J. Stroud shares, and I'm not starting him in any of those leagues this week on a short week in New York against that fake elite defense that the Jets have. But regardless of that, short week without his top 2 wide receivers, I'm sure he'll figure out a way to drop 303 touchdowns. But on paper, again, this is another one where how do you start CJ Stroud this week on a short week?
I'm not starting Stroud.
I mean, the crazy part of the whole Texas thing is I thought the last 2 years he looked kind of washed. He'd have like that 40-point week once a year. But I got to say, Joe Mixon, like right after King Henry, I got Mixon right there. Because, I mean, what this guy does week in and week out, and I faded him. I have maybe 1, I think 0 shares. Yeah. But if I have 1. And he's just been so impressive.
100%.
No, I agree with that. My other observation, more of a comment. I think Bijan's back. We were talking a few weeks ago. Chris and I mentioned we thought that maybe he had suffered some type of injury with the hammy, the shoulder, and he was laboring a little bit. Didn't look quite explosive. No lateral quickness. To make that first defender miss and explode through the line. And the last couple of weeks, I've seen that from him. So
that holding penalty sucked.
The touchdown. The touchdown callback. Real quick, the touchdown callback hurt, but Nelson, they're finally using him the right way. They're getting the ball to him out of the backfield. He's getting those 5, 6, 7 catches now. He looks explosive. The offense is clicking. Absolutely love it. Real quick though, for those of you listening, there's a pretty decent scoring change. I don't know if anybody saw it.
Yeah,
they took the Mooney catch away and they gave it to Bijan. So for any of you guys that lost by a point this week that had Bijan or Mooney in your lineups, you might be in for either a trick or a treat. How about that? How I put that all together, huh, guys? A little Halloween.
Nice. I like that one.
Yeah. I do have a comparison if you're talking about dynamic backs and rest of the season. I mean, Bijan versus Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, they're pretty much neck and neck with the points, 5-point difference. They both have. He has Algier. I mean, what's his name? Knuckles out there. He's a beast. He scores a touchdown every week. But I mean, Gibbs, and maybe this is the right way to use Gibbs, not giving him all the work and let Montgomery beat him up early and then put him in. So, but I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs is just the most dynamic back to me right now in the NFL. I'm not saying he's the best, the most dynamic.
I'm glad you brought up Jahmyr Gibbs. Nelson, you have something on that?
No, I mean, you're not going to hear an argument out of me. The kid's super explosive, and I agree with you that it was just more of the fact. Again, me not having enough Jahmyr Gibbs, because looking back, I wish I had more Jahmyr Gibbs and I was taking him in the 1-2 turn there, was just the fact that, Montgomery's around, and I expected the passing game to still, for them to still be aggressive with the passing game. And that hasn't been the case. They've actually been running more, and that's, opened it up for Gibbs to be, really, really good and kind of, take from last year, end of last year, we saw Gibbs like turn it on, and it's just, it's continued. And I got that wrong. I had, Gibbs, I wouldn't even say that I had him ranked low.
Did you have him 6? Did you have him 6, Nelson? There was obviously Barkley and Taylor.
I had him over Taylor.
Okay, so you had him. Who'd you have? Well, whatever. How'd you have Barkley, Taylor, and Gibbs?
Yeah, it was for me. It was Barkley, Gibbs, Taylor. Okay, so that's. Listen, that was everyone's 4, 5, 6. However you had it, they lived at the end of the first round, early second round, and it looks like all 3 are going to be home runs here. I loved what I saw out of Jonathan Taylor, the way they use him. He's not coming off the field, but I'm glad that you brought up Jahmyr Gibbs, Matt, because I had it as one of my points that I didn't get to. I don't know if you said
you forgot something, Chris.
Though
you said JT isn't coming off the field, but the quarterback is. I couldn't believe that. I just
garbage. He's absolute trash. But just to say, like, Jahmyr Gibbs is absolutely on fire right now. He started off his first 5, 6 weeks there with the bye included. He was between 13 and 17 points. One of those guys that wasn't moving the needle. He wasn't saving your days. He wasn't killing your days. He was just doing what he does, like right there. Rest of season here, he did this last year, right? He took off the second half. He might be RB1 from this day forward, rest of season, out of everyone. Because in that offense, with that offensive line, the way that Lions offense is humming, Jahmyr Gibbs is just going to be breaking off chunk plays and long touchdowns week in and week out. Jahmyr Gibbs just might be the guy who wins everybody all the money this year going forward.
Well, to Dan's point about mentioning Achane, who deserves to be in the conversation, but the weird thing, the reason I'm bringing this up too, is Tua coming back catapulted Achane and not Hill or Waddle. So I just found that like amazing.
It still helped Hill.
Yeah, it did, but you were expecting Hill. I know he had the injury, but you were expecting a lot more.
Yeah,
I was at least. Maybe.
I don't know how many of you are invested in Tyreek Hill. I'm not. I have a ton of Waddle, but I think it was the hope that we've suffered for 7 weeks, and now it was like, here comes week 8. Tyreek Hill's going to drop 35 fantasy points. Waddle's going to drop 30, and it was like, now we got to wait a week. The arrow's pointing up on both of them, but does it really matter if you're a Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle owner? You're probably sitting there 2-5, 2-6 right now. You need it to hit the ground running. There's better days ahead. It's probably one of, you know what they are? They're 2 of those players, Tyreek and Waddle, that you don't want to play against come week 12, 13, 14 in a head-to-head matchup versus a shit team that's like 3-10. And you look in his roster and he's like, oh shit, he's the Tyreek owner.
Yeah,
he's not playing for anything, but Tyreek's going to drop the 30 on me now. I couldn't play this guy in week 4. I get him in week 12 and 13. That's what Waddle and Hill are going to be going down the stretch.
I mean, that was another one of my observations was the whole Tua thing coming back. Like, he might be the most important quarterback in the NFL because Tyreek and Waddle went from like unplayable, and Achane was basically no bueno. And now you have Tua comes back, Achane monster game, and again Tyreek, respectable game, and Waddle actually was getting targets and picking up some yards. Like, not what you want. Like, you want more out of those guys, but I'm just saying, like, it's amazing. It's like night and day with that offense with Tua at quarterback.
Yep.
All right.
That's all I got, guys.
I only have one observation, so we can make this quick and move it on. I just looking at the Green Bay offense and watching a guy that quit on his team basically come back and be rewarded and basically kill all the other wide receiver options on this team is just like mind-boggling. Forget the Love injury. I don't think Love plays this week. I think he comes back after the bye. At least that's my assumption. But Christian Watson, I played him this week because it was against Jacksonville's defense. I'm like, I got to throw him in here. I can't play him anymore. It's got to be where bye week and or something like that. I'd rather play Josh Downs, who has a horrible quarterback, and but you look at him. Jaden Reed is one of the best players in the league. He's dropped a couple of deep passes the last 2 weeks. That's on him, but he's not getting the volume he should get. And Romeo Doubs is just like going off the last 2 weeks. He's like the guy. It's him and Tucker Kraft. And I'm just blown away with this. And then you have Wicks in there too, and Wicks and Watson are eating each other. So it's just amazing. I just, that whole thing, how he got rewarded for quitting on his team, blows my mind.
Yeah, totally agree. That was a weird situation. I mean, we're not in the locker room, so I guess, they handled their business how they needed to handle their business. It certainly hasn't seemed to affect them on the football field or in the win-loss column. So, I guess respect to them for pulling the team back together, but it seemed very weird from the outside. Okay.
Well,
Anything
that
else,
was it
Matt?
for me.
All right.
Yeah. Everything else was done.
Yeah. Mine is much the same. We covered a lot of what I had, but I think, one thing we sort of brushed against, but we didn't really talk about. We talked about the curtain dropping on a couple running backs who helped us early in the season. Singletary, Mason, definitely there. Zach Moss, you can throw him in that conversation as well. It's over for those guys, but I'm curious. I think we can kind of see it coming for Kareem Hunt. I think we can kind of see it coming possibly for Travis Etienne. And potentially even Chuba Hubbard. Are there any other? Do you guys think that's right, or are there any other guys that you think are potentially going from weekly starters to do I put them in my lineup or not?
I'm curious to see if Khalil Herbert gets traded this week. He was inactive. They activated Homer. Homer and Waldron had that Seattle connection, so he's like RB4. And if they can get anything for him, I think he's probably gone. And he can help. I mean, I still think Herbert's a good running back, but that's me.
So, when this Jonathan Brooks season has become a debacle. We all drafted him thinking he was going to get, come back in week 4 or 5. We're going into week 9 here, and the guy still is nowhere to be seen. But if they activate him this week finally, and he's going to start playing, maybe Miles Sanders, who's actually been looking decent in Carolina, gets shipped out. So add him to Khalil Herbert. One of these guys, if there's something up with Rico Dowdle with that sick and inactive thing on Sunday night, that whole mess, obviously Dalvin Cook and Zeke are both washed. But maybe Chicago goes and makes a move for Khalil Herbert or Miles Sanders. Mm-hmm. So I'd look for those two names.
But do you guys see any place where there's a changing of the guard, though? Like, Mostert, is he on
Javonte Williams, to answer your question. Yeah, Javonte Williams, maybe, Dan.
Okay. Who do you think is,
I'd say estimate. If they're going to have it was typical, like Chris mentioned earlier, and we all started Javonte after benching him last week. And then you see Jaleel scampering into the end zone. I was like, that's fantasy.
Yep.
I would say estimate, though. If I had to choose, he was pretty adamant about this 5th-round pick. It's not often you see a head coach when a rookie 5th-round pick gets a knee scope saying, don't worry, he's going to be back. He's going to be fine. We really like him. And I think at some point, maybe it's another couple of weeks away, but I think unless Javonte can really take advantage, that could happen.
Unfortunately, talking about speculating on some of these trades, I think it's the wide receivers that are going to be on the move. Like, Deontay is like an obvious one. I think.
Yeah, Nelson, where do you see Deontay? Because I'm glad you brought him up. That's a good topic. Everybody's got Deontay on the move, but where do you see the best fit? Like, what makes sense for Deontay Johnson?
I think Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay is giving.
You think they'll trade him in division?
I think it's
Washington.
Possible. Yeah, I think it's Washington is possible. Yep. They're in contention.
New front runner. Yeah, I think Washington's the new front
I think
runner.
they trade him in division because he's a free agent after this year. So, I mean, it's not like they got to worry about him haunting them for years. Yeah. I mean, the Steelers would be nice if he went back to Pittsburgh.
They can't do that deal, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I believe there's something with, him getting traded. He can't get traded back or something like that.
Yeah, I think you're right, Nelson.
So I think there's a lot of teams that are looking for wide receivers because of, the injuries. So, I think there's a lot of options. Like I said, Tampa makes the most sense only because I think Tampa, what they're doing is this is an audition for McMillan, Palmer, and Shepard. Okay. They want to see, can any of these guys step up and do something while Evans is gone. And next week, I think they're going to give it one more shot before the trade deadline. And if these kids doesn't look like they're getting it done, I think that's when Tampa will pull the trigger on a trade for a wide receiver.
So, listen, the names that we all hear are Tampa Bay, San Francisco. If you're a Deontay Johnson owner, me personally, I'm a big Deontay owner. I don't want him going either of those places because I just saw what it was like for Deontay Johnson to be in the wide receiver one alpha, spot. And now he's going to go to San Francisco where he's behind Debo and Kittle. It's an NFL team move where you bring in Deontay and yeah, that's great. But he'll have those weeks where he's 3 for 40, just helps the team out. Tampa Bay, you got Mike Evans coming back after the bye with Kate Otten looking good and a scattering of whatever. So maybe that is okay. He goes to Washington. He's the second fiddle to Terry McLaurin. Okay. There's only one spot where I think he walks in the door with a good quarterback and he's the alpha still, and that's the Chargers. And that's the only spot I want to see him go to. And I know you guys are all going to say Ladd McConkey. Yes, sure. But Ladd's still a rookie.
No, I actually like that, Chris.
I like that. He could play Ladd McConkey's never going to be your wide receiver one. He's never going to be your alpha. He's always going to be that really, really good wide receiver 2 PPR guy in the middle of the field. I know he just came off the huge game, but give me Deontay Johnson going out to the Chargers to make a playoff run with a Justin Herbert at quarterback, and I'll sign up for that all day, every day.
I'd rather see him on the Commanders. I think it's a better situation for him, even if
you're a Deontay Johnson owner.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a ton of them. Same
with Jaden Daniels running 15 times a game, handing off to Brian Robinson, feeding Terry McLaurin.
It's because they got Terry McLaurin and a bunch of lawn chairs out there. I mean, who else is he going to throw to? Zach Ertz is the second best receiver in that situation. I mean, I think if Deontay goes there, he gets fed.
I don't hate it neither. I don't
hate it. If I had a second choice, it would be Washington.
Yeah, if you're talking about pass volume, I mean, the Chargers is not the place to go for pass volume either. So
no. That's over and done with. The whole they want to run the ball 80 times a game and everything. You bring Deontay Johnson and you have a $50 million quarterback. Okay, J.K. Dobbins is turning into dust now. He's not the give them 30 times 30 rushes a game. They don't have any running back depth there. They can easily turn this offense into more of a passing offense with their $50 million quarterback. I'm just saying this, looking at it in the Deontay Johnson owner's eyes. Mm-hmm. Where can he go and not take a step backwards fantasy-wise? And to me, it's the Chargers. But I'll agree that Washington is the second place that could potentially have some hope.
I'll say this for Dan's argument, and I really like the Chargers, I'll call by you. It's like we say about all these other teams supporting the 2 wide receivers. And maybe Daniels doesn't run as much. Maybe instead of running 15 times, he's only running 8 to 10 times in a game. And I think as for their team, that would really help them. And they're saying he's probably going to go for like a 5th-round pick. That's what one of the beat writers said this morning. So
who's going for a 5th-round pick?
They were saying Deontay Johnson.
Deontay.
Man.
Because he's a free agent. So
yeah.
It's so crazy what these guys go for in trades, like just give away.
I'll tell you what, another guy to keep in mind is T. Higgins. With
T.
Cincinnati,
Hamstring Higgins.
What a joke that was. Friday.
Friday hamstring.
Oh, yeah.
This year. He's got a Friday hamstring.
Joke.
I'm just saying, like, you look at the situation with the Bengals, their record. They're gonna lose him next season.
I don't know if Nelson. That makes perfect sense. I don't know if they could do that to Burrow unless they lose this week. I mean, they're at home. They're 8-point favorites versus the Raiders. They should win. If they win, they're one game under 500. You can't tell a guy like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, you know what? We're going to trade T away and tank the season, because now you just throw in the towel. It's not like they're 1-7 or 2-6. You got to still fight for it. And these teams nowadays, they don't give a shit that they're not the 1 seed or the 2 seed. Sneak in as the 7 seed. You're just as good as anybody. You could beat anybody.
Yeah.
So
you have sellers and buyers at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. So if you have teams that feel like, hey, we got a shot at making the playoffs, and they're more interested in that than saving a few dollars, I think they'll be aggressive and look to acquire some of these wide receivers. That's the running back situation is actually trickier, because I think Sanders and Herbert are the guys to speculate on potentially moving, because I do think both guys are talented, and in the right situation, they could be kind of interesting to have. But when I go through like the NFL and look through teams that could use them and where they would be fantasy viable, outside of like the Cowboys, like there's, and it's okay, like, to say this, but like, there's just been no injuries, to running backs where teams feel a need to, go out and get one of these veteran guys. Cause like, I just don't see many spots, for NFL teams. Do you guys see like, Herbert, let's say you have Herbert and Sanders, you stashed them away, a week ago, just to speculate and see what happens. Outside of an injury this Sunday, what are the viable landing spots, for these guys?
I mean, for me, it'd be the Cowboys, but outside of them, like, I'm the biggest JK guy, but he can still get hurt and maybe hasn't been as effective the last couple of weeks. But you put Herbert in a run offense like that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head, Nelson. You're right. Everything seems clogged up. There's really not that many spots available that without an injury that a team is desperate to bring in a running back.
Right?
On a good
so many
playoff
so
team.
Many
I mean, is it a good team? I'd say the Bengals, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, supposedly they're going to win like 7 of the last 9. So.
Yeah. Well, they could go on a Jets run and go 9 in a row.
9 for 9, baby. Not giving up the fight.
Well, we're kind of circling back to my original point, which is, for guys like Raheem Mostert, who's arguably the number 2 in Miami right now, is Jalen Wright going to take his job? I mean, Mostert, I don't think has looked great. He's punched in a couple of, goal line scores to give him some touchdown deodorant, but he has not looked great. Kareem Hunt, I don't think, has looked great. He's getting the job done, but I don't think he looks great. Travis Etienne didn't look great. Is Bigsby going to take his job? I'm just curious what you guys think on these situations.
I totally agree with you on the Kansas City thing. With Hunt's like shelf life of being this bell cow rest of season. And they might look, they're giving up nothing. They just got this pass rusher kid from he's gonna be a free agent from the Patriots. They got D-Hop. I mean, it's not close.
Nelson's boy, Uchi.
Yeah, fifth round picks and stuff. So I mean, if you're getting Herbert for a 6th round pick and you work him in there, or a Miles Sanders and you put him in, I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities here.
Yeah, I think, Dan, most of it goes back to like sometimes my fades don't work out, and I chalk it up to it being an outlier. Kyron Williams was that outlier this year. I have a process that I follow, and I did not have Kyron Williams because I just didn't believe in, NFL, draft pick, where he went in the draft. Dude's like, 5'9", 198, all those factors, usually those guys don't succeed. He's just built different. And I will say another outlier was Mostert last year. Okay. You don't get those kind of games from that kind of season from like a 30-something-year-old back every year. And I think you're seeing that, this year with Mostert, is that he was just a guy that you needed to fade and not go after. So I could actually see that one, Dan, very much so, where they kind of move on from Mostert, and Jalen Wright actually has been looking good in limited action. And, he's averaging, 8 yards a carry or something like that. I think you got to get him more.
And the head coach is talking him up. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And then who was the other guy, Dan, that you mentioned?
ETN, because I thought it was really interesting that, this week, one of the small things I noticed was that Bigsby got 3 targets this week. He'd only had 2 targets for the entire season leading up to this week, and then he gets 3 targets this week, and before when ETN was down, they were using D'Ernest Johnson, as more of the receiving back. So I found it interesting that Bigsby got those touches in the receiving game, or targets in the receiving game. What do you guys think? Is ETN somebody who could potentially move? He's on his 5th-year option.
I mean, where? Like, that's the thing. Like, to Nelson's point, where does he go other than Dallas? And I mean, I thought Kamara could have gotten moved, and maybe he still can, but he signed the contract extension last week. I thought he was the one running back that was definitely going to get moved, and it made sense to maybe go to Kansas City, even though they brought in Hunt. But at the same time, now it looks like Pacheco is going to actually make it back probably by like week 13 or 14 or something like that. And what does Kansas City care? They don't care about the next 5 weeks. They're 7-0. They're cruising to the West. They could fill in their running backs, given 5 carries each to each of these guys, and then look up, be 10-2, and get Pacheco back, their stud running back. So they're not going to make a move for an ETN or a Kamara. Yeah. So it's kind of Dallas or bust. And really, if you're Dallas, what are you taking on that money for? Yeah. Anyway, where are you going if you're Dallas?
Where do you have that money?
Yeah.
I mean, Dallas is never giving up. Like they're never going to be sellers.
True.
That's just not it. Jerry Jones runs the show, and that's not in his DNA. So he's always going to look at it from rose-colored glasses that they could potentially make a run there in the East.
Yeah, but they just can't take on any more contract. You still you signed CD, Dak. You got to get Parsons signed. If it's for this year, yeah, maybe, but anything like long term, I don't.
It'd be funny though if Kamara goes to Denver, actually, because at the end of the game last week, Kamara did tell Sean Payton, "Come get me, come save me," or whatever. And Denver 5-3. Maybe they're looking at themselves as a playoff.
They sure ought to be. I mean, their defense is good enough.
Yeah, Javante's isn't Javante in a walk year this year?
Yeah,
right?
This is his walk year. Yeah, exactly.
So,
which is why I think you guys are right about Estime getting a shot.
Yeah. It's just shame. It's a shame that Estime fumbled in that game versus New Orleans. He got the first carry of the game. Then they went to Javante. He got hot, so credit to him. But, Estime got another series later on in that game, and he fumbled. And you go right back to the back of the line if you're a rookie who fumbles like that. So, unless he gets a late season shot, if Javante keeps fizzling, they're not going to give Jaleel McLaughlin 15 carries. So that's the only situation I could see opening up there. That's it.
Yep. Good point. All right, guys, we've gone almost an hour and 40 minutes. We've given everybody an extra 10 minutes of our time. let's get out of here real quick. Just bring it full circle on the Halloween and favorite candy and least favorite candy. I'll go first on this one. For favorite candy, I mean, just give me the Reese's peanut butter cups. Those things are so dang addictive. I cannot keep them around the house because I will eat them. So they just don't get to be around my house. And then the worst has got to be the red Twizzlers. It's like chewing on an extension cord.
Dang.
Come on,
Man.
Red Twizzlers.
terrible.
I could see black licorice Twizzlers. You know?
No,
You brought up
black is the only kind of
you
licorice.
hate red Twizzlers that much with all the shit candy out there. Red Twizzlers made your
Red
list
Twizzlers. It's like an extension cord, man.
Of,
I mean, for me, I'm going to scrap the candy. This past weekend, The Terminator was released 40 years ago. It's not really a scary movie, but it kind of is with all these robots being built now. Elon Musk got an army of robots. Still an excellent movie. I'm a cinema buff. It is a better movie as a movie than T2. T2 was visually groundbreaking. Yes.
All right.
As a movie.
Let's keep it on movies, Matt, because I'm a
Matty
cinema
went
buff.
from the candy topic to let me tell you what my favorite
Screw candy.
I
Let's
just
talk
watched
movies.
Saturday night
Favorite
again.
movie
It was
is.
awesome. I recommend you watch it.
All right. Are you going to go see the new Gladiator?
Nelson, what's your favorite coffee
Yes.
at Dunkin'? Yeah.
Let's switch it. Let's talk about coffee.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh man, Nelson, what do you got on the candy front or the movie front? What do you got on either topic?
My go-to is like peanut M&Ms and Heath Bar. Like those
I like that.
Heath Bar is legit too.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the Heath Bar. I'll give it a try, guys. But there's only one. The automatic CMC of CD Lamb of candy in Halloween, and that's the Snickers. It's the 1-1. Can't go wrong with a Snickers. It's by far the best chocolate candy bar out there. Peanut M&Ms is a close second, though, Nelson. I'll give you that one. And Almond Joys make the top three for me. So those are my
Reggie
top
Bar might have
three.
been one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, I don't know about the Reggie Bar either, Matt. But
I'm sure
Terminator was a good
that
movie.
Was a fantastic candy bar.
Stick to movies, Matt.
That's it. And anything with that's waxy. Those are the worst candies growing up. The candy corn. Those wax things you just stick in your mouth. It's disgusting. It's gross. Killing America's children.
Yeah,
The youth of America.
I think when we all decompose in the grave, we're gonna have whatever candy corn we ate throughout our life is still gonna be sitting there.
It's disgusting.
It's so bad. All right, I
We
think
covered
that does
it all.
on that note, appreciate you guys tuning in with us, and check us out next Tuesday, 11 o'clock. Make sure you're hitting the like button. Subscribe to the Player Profiler channel. Both of those really help us out. And if you're listening to the podcast, give the show a like there. Give us a 5-star review on Apple. We appreciate that. And until then, good luck to all our listeners and viewers, and let's have a good week.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.